Sarah, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books I read for the month of June. So, in June, I read 2 2-star books, 3 3-star books, a whole bunch of 4-star books, and then my number 1 5-star book. I'm going to start from least favorites and move on to most favorites, just so you know, kind of have a big reveal for you guys there on what my favorite was. So starting off, least favorite that I read was The Plague, however you want to say it. I already talked quite a bit about why I didn't like this one in my Seeking a Book for the End of the World video, so go ahead and check that one out if you haven't already. But this is a book about the plague written in the 1940s. In this universe, women do not exist, and despite the fact that the book is called The Plague, not many people get the plague. So it's just boring. I would not recommend this one. If you want to read a book about plagues, I would recommend The Stand by Stephen King. My other 2-star, which I did enjoy the reading of slightly more than The Plague, is called The Knockout Queen. And this one, I did not like this one. From the cover, it looks like it's kind of a fun, lighthearted, sports-themed book, you might think from the title and the cover. And it kind of is, because the titular Knockout Queen is named Bunny. And when the book begins, she is actually a volleyball star, which sounded great to me because I absolutely love volleyball. But that's just not what this book is about, unfortunately. It's narrated from the perspective of Bunny's best friend, Michael, who is her next door neighbor, and a significant portion of the book is focused on Michael's issues as a young gay teenager. But I felt like the story was more Bunny's story than Michael's, despite it being a first-person perspective from Michael's perspective. It just seems super inconsistent in a lot of places. So for example, in the back of the book and in a lot of places, Bunny would be described as beautiful, popular, well-liked. But then a lot of the narratives seem to make it like she and Michael were these outcast loners that didn't have any other friends. And there was a lot of description of Bunny ends up being a very tall woman, which makes sense because she plays volleyball and one of her goals is to make it to the Olympics. And there's, I think it's like a whole chapter, just a lot of description on her growth as a young teen. And it makes it sound almost horrific. Like, I thought it was gonna come out that she had like a pituitary tumor or even acromegaly from the way it was describing like her jaw and her hands growing and everything. It was clear the author thought that her end height, which was 6'3", was just horrific and unheard of in a woman. It is extremely rare. Like, if you look at the growth distributions of women, not many women make it to 6'3". However, if you're talking about the world of competitive volleyball, in particular women that are aiming to go to the Olympics to play front row as a hitter, which Bunny was, 6'3" is nothing. 6 foot is pretty much like the minimum standard for that kind of position. And 6'3", like, that's a bonus. Like, if you look at some of the big names in college volleyball, I watch college volleyball, so just off the top of my head, I think Dana Retke, who plays for Wisconsin, is, I want to say 6'8". So there are definitely women out there that are taller even than Bunny was described as. Oh, Lauren Stivrins plays for Nebraska, 6'4". I don't know how tall the author is, but it was clear that she thought that women of this height were just unheard of and like almost grotesque. And that's just not true. Like, there's plenty of women that tall, and Bunny would know this because she's a huge volleyball fan. So Bunny getting to that height, like, a lot was made out of it, and it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me as someone who wanted to go to the Olympics to play volleyball. Like, she would have had to be at least 6 foot tall if she wanted to be a front row hitter, and 6'3" is just even better. So anyway, Michael and Bunny are best friends, and there's a horrific event, like really horrific, and that kind of ends up defining most of the book. And it's just one of those things where the story just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Like, more bad things just keep happening and piling on top of each other. Like, horrific bad things, not just normal bad stuff, like really bad shit. It's not like I can't take a sad book. It's not like I can't take bad things happening in a book, but there has to be some kind of reason for it narratively. It has to make sense as a story and not just be bad things for the sake of bad things. It was just a fucking downer. I did not enjoy it. All right, moving into my 3 stars. Bottom of the 3 stars was Devolution. This is the long-awaited second novel by Max Brooks, and it focuses on a Bigfoot attack. And I go into more detail about this book in my Even More Books 2nd June book haul. It's not terrible, it's just not great. I expected more from Max Brooks, and if Bigfoot is coming for you in between the separate Bigfoot attacks, you are not going to be writing novella-length descriptions of said Bigfoot attacks in your journal. You're just not. I didn't go into it much in my other video, but the pacing was just super weird on this one. Like, if you go back and look at the dates of the diary entries, the way everything's happening, she literally would not have had time to write this diary. Like, it's not just like it's more descriptive or unrealistic that she would write this diary. She would not have had time to do it with everything else that is going on. And something else I didn't mention either was the book was clearly trying to be a bit of a social commentary in certain ways, and the leaders of the compound are this couple, and the narrator of the book originally thinks that they are this perfect couple, perfect in every way, and as the book goes on, they devolve as well, and which is fine. Like, I get what he's trying to say there, but it is drastic. They go from perfect glamour couple, then they disappear, and then like a week later, the woman has exercised herself to a skeletal shred of a human being, and the husband is basically sitting around in his own skid-marked underwear and filth, and it's just, it's too fast, it's too drastic, to the point of being ridiculous. And another 3-star for me was The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I enjoyed it. I always enjoy her writing. I will be reading parts of this book, and I literally felt like my heart was pounding right along with the character and that I was experiencing everything with her. My problem with this one is that it started off strong with a really interesting premise. The woman's on a cruise, a very small cruise. A passenger goes missing. She believes this person has been killed and thrown overboard. But the problem is that there's no record of the person ever having been on the boat, and no one seems to be missing. So it starts off really strong. I really liked the premise, but the solution was just extremely convoluted and twisted and just extremely unlikely. It didn't wrap itself up neatly, and parts of it, looking back, I still don't get why certain characters would have, like, the motivations that were supposed to be happening there. So it's a good read, but it just, the ending didn't come together well, in my opinion. And then I also read Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is another mystery thriller, which I've been all about this month, and I quite liked this one. It's good, just not as much as some of his others, which is why it ended up being 3 stars. It's about a woman who is the sole survivor of a mass murder event several years ago. She has no memory of the event, and this is kind of a theme in several of the mystery thrillers I read this month, and this was the last one, so maybe I was just over it by the time I got to this book, but selective amnesia is, as a plot point, I'm kind of over it, and I get why it's done for the sake of the plot. It's frustrating if you read a bunch of books where that's the plot point, is that they just don't remember for no reason. But anyway, the main character, she meets up with another girl who was also the survivor of a mass murder event. And there's a third girl, had the same kind of situation, who has recently died. And they're kind of looking into that, and it's good. I liked it better than The Woman in Cabin 10, but it is my least favorite of the Riley Sagers that I have read. And then moving on to my 4 stars. The bottom of my 4 stars is Panic by Lauren Oliver. This one I read because I read that it was a better version of the book Nerve, and I quite liked it. It is a lot better than the Nerve book for sure. And this is about a very, I would say poverty-stricken is probably a safe way to talk about this town. All of the high school seniors, every year after graduation, many of them will compete in this game they call Panic. And basically it's a series of escalating challenges that are meant to be dangerous and terrifying. If you don't make it through the challenge, you get eliminated. And at the end, the winner wins this pot of money that they've all saved up. So it's usually like tens of thousands of dollars, a big pot of money. Very high stakes in a town where most people are struggling a lot. And I like this one. I like that it did not hold back on the poverty aspect. Nothing particularly special, but a good fun read. And then next I had The Unhoneymooners. This one I quite liked. This is, without a doubt, a frivolous, predictable romantic comedy. But there were parts of this book where I actually laughed out loud while reading it, and that doesn't happen a lot for me. The plot's a little contrived. The main character, her twin sister gets married, and at the wedding there is a giant outbreak of food poisoning that everybody else gets, And so she ends up having to take her sister's place on her honeymoon, and she goes on the honeymoon with her sister's husband's brother, who of course she previously hated for no good reason whatsoever. They just hated each other. That is something I don't particularly like in books, where two characters hate each other, and then in order to justify them getting together, it has to be that the reason they hated each other was stupid. But then it's like, why did they hate each other when the reason was so stupid? Which just ended up making no sense. But most of the book, very funny, very enjoyable. I liked it quite a bit. I would recommend this if you're just looking for a very lighthearted, funny read. And then I've got another Ruth Ware. This is, I believe, her first novel. It's called In a Dark, Dark Wood. I like this one better than The Woman in Cabin 10. Although I will say this one, the plot was more predictable, but I liked that better. I liked predictable better than off the rails, crazy, and impossible. So there's that. This is about a group of people that are at a bachelorette party. We know from the beginning that something bad happens at the bachelorette party, but we don't know what until halfway through the book, so I'm not going to spoil it because I do think this one's worth reading. My only problem with this one, the plot twist, if you'll call it that, becomes very evident early on. As you're going through everything, there's just really only one person that could have done it, and it becomes very obvious. They try to throw in a red herring, but it's not at all convincing. And I just wanted a little bit more of a twist, but overall, quite liked it. I will say it does also use convenient amnesia. As we're going through the book, we start off with the main character waking up in the hospital, and she doesn't know what has happened to her or what happened at the bachelorette party, and we're going kind of back in time as she's remembering everything. But there's just no real good reason for her to have forgotten this stuff. She did have a head injury, but I don't think this type of selective amnesia is really that common. It's 100% a plot device. And then my next 4-star was the newest book by Emily Giffin. This is called The Lies That Bind, and I quite enjoyed this one. Emily Giffin is my favorite author. She has written several 5-star books for me, and she is one that I always look forward to her new book releases. But I will say the last 3, in particular the last 2, I was not a fan of. This one I thought was a bit of a return to form. As she's been writing her books over the years, her main characters tend to get older and farther along in life, as she does, which makes sense. This one goes back to a young narrator in the city looking for love, and I loved it. I loved the return to that. I enjoyed the romance. I did have a bit of a problem with the big plot twist, and if you read this, I don't want to give it away because this is a good book. I plan to do a review on all of the Emily Giffin books, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail then, without giving too much away. This is about a young woman in the city in 2001, and she meets kind of a mysterious man that she starts a relationship with, but they haven't been dating very long, and he goes missing on September 11th after the attacks on the World Trade Center. All right, and then my last 4-star was The Good Marriage. This is another mystery thriller. I have read the other books by this author, and I liked them both. I would say they were actually more dark than this one. Like, her other 2 books were extremely depressing. This one had some sad stuff, but not nearly as bad as the other 2, which I enjoyed because I did like the other ones, but sometimes they got dark. They got real dark. This is about a woman who is a lawyer, and she's defending an old classmate of hers from law school who has been accused of murdering his wife, and she's working as his lawyer and trying to figure out what actually happened when his wife was murdered. And the thing I thought really made this one special was its commentary on marriage. It has a lot of really subtle but interesting, I think, just commentaries on what married life is like and just what it means to be connected to someone like that. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was good as a mystery, and then I thought it was also good for its kind of opinions on marriage. I enjoyed it. And then my favorite book for the month was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I will say, I gave this 5 stars. Lock Every Door is still my favorite by Riley Sager. I don't think it topped that one, but I did really like this. This is about a woman who, as a child, her family stayed in a house. They left the house extremely suddenly and mysteriously one night, and her father and mother maintained the reason was because the house was haunted and that they had to escape the ghosts, and that's why they left the house suddenly in the middle of the night. And her father ends up writing a best-selling book about this. The novel is taking place after the father has died, and his daughter finds out that he still owns the house, and she's a house renovator, so she goes to the house and she's trying to fix it up to sell it, and weird things start happening, all the weird things that the father described in the book. And I really liked it. I thought the mystery had a good resolution. I just thought it was solid storytelling. I will say, after reading this book, I ended up watching The Haunting of Hill House, and there's some definite similarities there, like with the family leaving the house in the middle of the night and saying it's because it was haunted, and then one of the characters writing a best-selling book about it and profiting off of the haunted house story. Ultimately, this book I don't think is a Haunting of Hill House ripoff. The story goes in a very different place. So if that sounds like your thing, I would read this book and probably also watch The Haunting of Hill House. And that's it for my June reads. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, what you thought about them. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I really appreciate comments and hearing from what other people think about these books. So please give it a thumbs up if you like this video, and please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of my videos. Thanks, bye.